Over the next few minutes, I'll show you the best camera settings for the Samsung S26 Ultra and the hidden features its cameras have to offer. I've divided this guide into the best settings for the photo mode and the video mode. If you'd like to rewatch or rewind to any part of this guide at any time, I've included timestamps below to make this easy. Especially for video recording, there's an accessory that gives you a wide range of additional features. A smartphone gimbal. This video is sponsored by Insta360 and the Flow 2 Pro. Since our goal today is to achieve the best possible results in both photo and video modes, we'll also look at and adjust a few advanced settings. Some of these settings are only available through the additional Camera Assistant app. This applies to both photo mode and video mode. That's why we should install this app right at the beginning. You can find it in the Galaxy Store. Not the Play Store, but the Galaxy Store. With the app, you can change a number of advanced settings. These include focus peaking, automatic image sharpening, resolution, and more. Even advanced users will rarely need most of these settings, but some are important for us today. But before we get to the advanced settings, let's take a look at 3 important features of the camera app. You should definitely be familiar with these. When you tap on a subject in the camera app's preview, the focus and exposure adjust to that subject. Normally, the camera does this automatically, and it's really only necessary if that didn't work properly. What's interesting though is that you can also adjust the exposure by sliding the small sun icon to the left or right. Moving it to the left makes the shot darker. Moving it to the right makes it brighter. Depending on the situation, this can be useful and necessary. If you then tap the small lock icon, the circle turns yellow and the exposure and focus are locked, so they won't adjust even if you move the camera or change the framing. You achieve the same result by tapping and holding on the subject. Especially for video recording, you should do this as often as possible, because automatic adjustments to the exposure or the focus during recording can look unprofessional depending on the shot. Even if you've adjusted the exposure, your adjustment will be lost if you change the recording mode. If you want to consistently underexpose or overexpose your shots, for example to create a specific look, you should use the exposure compensation in the camera menu. The exposure compensation will be retained even if you switch shooting modes, but it will be reset when you close the camera app. I'll show you how to prevent that later. Whether in video or photo mode, when a subject gets very close, the camera automatically switches to macro mode. On the S26 Ultra, however, only one lens is capable of taking extreme close-ups, the ultra-wide lens. Therefore, when an object gets very close, the camera automatically switches to the ultra-wide lens without notifying you. You'll notice this switch due to strange image jumps. While you can take very cool close-ups with the macro mode, this automatic lens switch is one of the most common reasons for a significant drop in image quality. This is because to maintain a consistent framing, the image is often heavily cropped. That's why it's possible to disable the automatic macro mode. If an object comes very close, a yellow flower appears here in the bottom left corner. If you tap on it, the macro mode is deactivated. Pay attention to this and always deactivate the macro mode whenever you don't actually want to take a true close-up. Sometimes it may then be necessary to move the camera a little further away from the object to focus correctly. And that brings us to an important topic that is often underestimated. The lenses on the S26 Ultra are not all equal. Of the 4 cameras on the back, not all are equal. You shouldn't choose a camera based only on the zoom factor. The 4 cameras not only have different technical properties, but they also produce a different look. By far the best camera is the wide-angle main camera, meaning the camera with the 1x zoom factor. It not only has by far the largest sensor, but also the widest aperture of the 4 cameras. These are decisive advantages, especially in low-light conditions. In these situations, you should therefore prefer the wide-angle main camera. It is also the only camera capable of taking extremely high-resolution shots at 200 megapixels. However, with a focal length of 24mm, it has a relatively wide field of view and due to distortion isn't suitable for every type of shot. For portraits, one of the 2 telephoto lenses is significantly better. That is the cameras with the 3x or 5x zoom factors. It should be noted, however, that the telephoto camera with the 3x zoom factor has by far the smallest sensor. Not only does it have a reduced resolution of only 10 megapixels, but the small sensor also has disadvantages in low-light conditions. In these situations, you should therefore avoid using this camera. The ultra-wide camera not only enables good landscape shots, but the extremely wide angle also results in very good image stabilization. I use this lens frequently, especially for video recording. All other zoom factors, namely 2x, 10x, and of course 100x, are essentially digital crops that will result in reduced quality. while in the case of 2x or 10x, just a smaller section of the sensor is used and the loss of quality is limited, you should definitely avoid using zoom factors that fall between the camera's native zoom factors. What you should take away from this chapter is: lock the focus and exposure as often as possible, especially for video recordings. Use the flower icon to disable the macro mode when you don't need it, and choose the optimal lens based on specific needs, not just the zoom factor. So how should you set up the camera for optimal results in photo mode? By default, the S26 Ultra takes 12 megapixel photos. If you plan to view your photos on a larger screen, you should increase the resolution. In addition to 12 megapixels, you also have the option of 50 megapixels and 200 megapixels. Keep in mind that 200 megapixel shots are only possible with the wide-angle main camera. The 3x telephoto lens is also unable to take 50 megapixel photos. When you open the Camera Assistant app, you'll find an additional 24 megapixel option under Photos. I'd recommend enabling it and selecting Keep 24 megapixel resolution here as well. Once you've enabled the option, you'll find the 24 megapixel option in the camera app. I consider 24 megapixels a good choice for most situations. If you want to print a photo, I choose 50 megapixels. Let's take a closer look at the camera app settings. I'll only cover the settings that are particularly important and that you should pay close attention to. This definitely includes Photo Enhancer. Most professional photographers would prefer a more natural, non-digital look from a camera. And of course, the camera on your S26 Ultra does everything it can to enhance the photo using AI and digital sharpening. If that's too much for you, you can set it to balanced here. This also speeds up the capture process. But you should know that this setting doesn't seem to work well with the 24 megapixel resolution. I'm not sure if this is a bug, but if you don't select Prioritize Quality, 24 megapixel photos are saved at 12 megapixels. Under Photo Format, you can select HEIF as the format. This is useful because the images are compressed more efficiently. This results in smaller file sizes and saves storage space. But keep in mind that not every app and every software program can handle this format. Shooting in RAW only makes sense if you plan to edit your photos heavily. You'll need the right software for editing. But in this case, shooting in RAW gives you significantly more creative freedom and flexibility. If you only edit your photos slightly and mainly on your smartphone, you don't need RAW shots. Also because RAW files take up significantly more storage space. Tracking autofocus is a fantastic feature. Similar to what we discussed earlier regarding focus and exposure, you can tap on a subject and the focus will then be set on that subject, with the key difference that in the case of tracking autofocus, this subject remains in focus even if it moves. This works with objects as well as people. You can easily recognize the feature by the yellow frame. And since we're talking about tracking, before we look at the rest of the settings, the camera can, of course, only track what's currently in the frame. It can't move automatically. And if tracking is something you're interested in, you should consider a gimbal. You can set the gimbal up somewhere and the camera will follow the subject around, no matter where it moves. And when it comes to smartphone gimbals, there's probably no better choice right now than the Flow 2 Pro. This is also true for Android phones. The Flow 2 Pro not only has an integrated selfie stick, which is great for filming yourself while vlogging, but it also has a stable tripod integrated into the handle. You can simply set up the gimbal somewhere and start tracking with the trigger button. The Flow 2 Pro then automatically detects the subject and begins tracking it. Or you can start tracking and recording from a distance with a hand gesture without touching the gimbal or your phone. The Flow 2 Pro supports Android and can track a subject even with the new 5x telephoto lens of the S26 Ultra. This means that advanced AI tracking also works with Samsung devices. And if needed, you can easily zoom in and out and quickly switch between cameras using the zoom wheel on the side. And don't worry, with the AI tracker, tracking works not only in the Insta360 app, but in all apps. This includes shooting with the Instagram app, TikTok, or the native camera app. One of my favorite features is that the gimbal also serves as a power bank. You can even connect your phone and charge it while recording. And of course, the Flow 2 Pro enables extremely stable shots and cinematic camera movements that are difficult to achieve without a gimbal. If you're interested in the Insta360 Flow 2 Pro, you'll find a link to it in the description below. If you use the link, you'll also get a magnetic phone mount as a free gift. But let's get back to the most important settings you should adjust for better results in photo mode. In the camera app settings, under General, you'll find a feature called Composition Guide that you should definitely enable, specifically grid lines and level. For a good photo, you should often follow the rule of thirds And avoid placing your subject strictly in the center of the frame. Instead, position it along the lines of thirds. The level is also extremely useful. It lights up yellow when the horizon is straight, and when the green light disappears, you're holding the S26 Ultra upright correctly. I also prefer to open the quick controls with a swipe rather than accidentally switching to the selfie camera. That's why I've changed the setting here. Under Settings to keep, you can choose which camera settings should be retained even when you close the app. This can be useful because if you usually use the camera in the same mode or with similar settings, you won't have to change them every time. That's why I definitely enable camera mode and high picture resolution here. The S26 Ultra has a range of really good filters. You can enable them here. I particularly like classic film. By tapping on the icon in the middle, you can also adjust the filter and, for example, change the temperature. However, there's actually hardly any reason to enable the filter before taking the photo. You can also add the same filters afterward, which in my opinion makes much more sense, since that way you can see which filter works best for each photo. I'd also make some additional changes in the Camera Assistant app. We saw earlier that the lenses of the 4 cameras have very different characteristics, and I told you to choose the lens deliberately. In fact, regardless of your decision, the S26 Ultra sometimes switches lenses in the background without you noticing. To prevent this, I'd recommend disabling auto lens switching. I wouldn't make any further changes here for the photo mode. We'll come back to the Camera Assistant app for the video mode. There are situations where you might want to adjust the exposure completely manually. For example, you might be using the S26 Ultra on a tripod and want to take a long exposure, or you might want to use a slow shutter speed to better capture motion, or you might want to manually set the white balance under artificial lighting to achieve a specific look. In all these situations, you'll need to use the Pro mode. Here you can set everything manually. If you plan to use the Pro mode frequently, go to the Shooting Modes menu, select Edit and drag the Pro mode down to the bottom. The S26 Ultra is one of the best smartphones for video recording, but to achieve the best possible results in video mode, we need to make a few adjustments to the settings here as well. Again, however, you should keep in mind that there isn't a single setting that will lead to optimal results in every situation. Instead, you should adjust the settings to suit the situation. The most important settings are definitely those related to resolution and frame rate. The S26 Ultra is capable of shooting in 8K at 30 frames per second. Nevertheless, in most cases, I would recommend a resolution of 4K, which is UHD. 8K not only results in huge files, but it also offers fewer frame rate options and can lead to disadvantages in dynamic range and low light performance. In normal video mode, only 30 or 60 frames per second are available as frame rates. As a general rule, a higher frame rate produces a smoother and more natural look. With a frame rate of 60 frames per second, you can also create a slow motion recording of up to 40%. But more frames per second not only result in larger files. A higher frame rate also has drawbacks in low light conditions. Therefore, if you don't want to take slow motion shots, I would recommend 30 frames per second as the default. For really cool slow motion shots, you should select the slow motion mode and shoot in 4K at 120 frames per second. This allows you to capture not only cool action shots, but also interesting cinematic B-roll footage. But that's not all you need to know on this topic. Many believe that the best frame rate is actually 24 frames per second. Such a low frame rate is considered particularly cinematic, as professional movies are shot at this frame rate. For this frame rate, we need the Pro video mode. Here too, the same rule applies. If you want to use this mode frequently, you should add it to your standard recording modes. Only here will 24 frames per second be available to you. While such a low frame rate looks more cinematic than 30 frames per second, it does have a drawback. If you are shooting in daylight and don't use an ND filter, it can result in a very jerky look, especially if there's a lot of movement in the shot. Personally, I would therefore only use 24 frames per second in combination with manual exposure settings and ND filters. When you open the settings, you can also make some very important changes here. Under video format, you can choose between HEVC and H.264. HEVC compresses the recordings more efficiently, resulting in much smaller file sizes. Personally, I use HEVC, partly because it doesn't compromise quality in any way. But if you're using an older computer, it might not handle HEVC very well, so it depends on your hardware which option is best for you. For optimal image quality, you should set the bitrate to high. This is the only way to save as much data as possible when recording. Of course, this also results in larger files. HDR video has little to do with HDR photos in principle. In this context, HDR means that the recording contains significantly brighter highlights than a normal video recording. This looks particularly realistic, even if many people don't perceive it as very cinematic. In fact, however, not all screens can display such high brightness levels. Your S26 Ultra can of course handle this, and HDR recordings clearly differ from non-HDR recordings when viewed on the S26 Ultra. However, when you transfer the recordings to your computer, they are usually converted during playback and hardly differ from a normal video recording. Therefore, if you primarily want to watch your recordings on your S26 Ultra, I would recommend shooting in HDR. If you need the footage more for a longer project, then you can also disable the feature. In contrast, log is a flat color profile that, as you can see here, has low saturation and contrast. Such a profile is particularly well suited for editing the colors of your footage and creating your own cinematic look. Since the footage is so desaturated, you'll definitely need to edit it and add contrast and saturation. Samsung also provides a lot to convert log footage quickly and easily. You can download it from the Samsung homepage. I'll include the link in the description below. And you should definitely use such a conversion LUT, since the log profile also affects the colors. Many people believe that a log profile always results in a better dynamic range. And compared to normal recording in Pro video mode, that's true, but not compared to the standard video mode, since in that case, a certain amount of HDR processing takes place in the background. I'm a fan of log, partly because the footage looks more natural, softer, and significantly more cinematic than in standard video mode. But you need to be aware that you'll have to edit all your footage. And I understand that this isn't ideal for everyone. APV is an absolute pro feature. It enables very low compression of the footage. The footage is therefore easy to edit and you get the best possible quality. But that also comes with a downside. The files are very large, significantly larger than those of normal video recordings. You can still choose between HQ and LQ here, though LQ already offers very good quality and files that are only half as large. True professionals will therefore shoot in APV and log. But APV has another drawback. It is currently supported by only a few programs, such as DaVinci Resolve, but not by my Mac. I would disable Auto FPS, because I don't want the frame rate to be reduced without being aware of it. And for the video mode, let's also take a look at the Camera Assistant app. Especially for video recording, I find it helpful to be able to see more clearly what's currently in focus. Here, you can adjust the focus peaking settings. Note that this feature is only available in Pro mode and when you're focusing manually. Apart from that, there's another important setting. To make a recording look sharper, virtually all cameras artificially increase the contrast at the edges. While this looks sharp and good at first glance, it also has a very digital and artificial look. So if you're aiming for a particularly cinematic look in video mode, you should take a closer look at the video softening setting. Basically, this doesn't make a sharp shot softer, but rather makes a shot look less artificially sharpened. Try medium or high, you'll see that it makes the shot look more cinematic and professional. If it looks too soft, you can always add some sharpness in post. Okay, we've talked a lot about settings now, but I'd like to give you one last tip. No matter which settings you use, you'll make the most progress by practicing and trying things out. So take as many shots as possible and always think about what worked well for you and what you didn't like so much. And help me with the algorithm by giving me a like as feedback if you found the video interesting. And let me know in the comments what else you would like to know about the S26 Ultra's cameras. Check out the link to the Insta360 Flow 2 Pro if that interests you. If you're interested in why the Flow 2 Pro is currently the best smartphone gimbal, check out my comparison with the DJI Osmo Mobile 8. I've included a link to that video in the description as well. There will be more videos and tutorials on the S26 Ultra coming soon. So stay tuned and see you next time.